Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The season is over for Purdue, but the transfer portal makes for no shortage of Purdue basketball news to discuss. We'll talk about the exits. We'll talk about a high-profile addition. We'll discuss what might be next for Purdue's roster. I'm going to tell you why Purdue is an absolute national championship contender for next year. Answer some of your questions. There's a lot to get to today. Let's go ahead and dive in. If you don't already, follow the show on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Even though there aren't any games, even though we're 20 weeks or so away from Purdue football resuming, you're going to want to follow along. We'll be there all summer talking all things Purdue sports. Come join that conversation. You can always send in questions for the show there or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks to everyone who participated in the bracket challenge this year. Looks like we got a couple of folks who could win this based off of the Florida-Houston result. So listen to next week's episode. Get in touch with me if you're the winner, and we'll get you on the pod sometime here, maybe towards the end of April. So Purdue has had a busy week, to put it mildly. The season ended now 9 days ago, as I record this here on Sunday, April 6th. The season ended 9 days ago, and in this day and age, the transfer portal begins the moment your season ends. And for Purdue, that was the case. We talked about Brian Waddell going in the portal, and then Berg followed soon after the episode was posted. But I think the message from this past week is welcome to modern day college basketball. Purdue has been in its own stratosphere a little bit in the last few years on how few portal players it took. I remember a couple years ago when there were only 4 power conference schools not to have a single player transfer, and Purdue was one of them. And I think, was it coming into this year? I think it was coming into this year that it was just Purdue and Marquette as power conference programs that didn't add a transfer. Purdue has not been super involved in the transfer portal craziness that has really captivated the sport over the past 3 or 4 years since the one-time transfer rule was implemented back in 2020. Now, Purdue has never been super anti-portal the way like Clemson football was for a while. It got portrayed that way because Purdue used it so little compared to some of these other schools, compared to some of these programs that are really putting together a brand new roster year over year, that it got portrayed that way, that Purdue didn't want to use the portal, that Purdue didn't like the portal, even though that wasn't true. David Jenkins came out of the portal. Lance Jones was a massive piece on a Final Four team out of the portal, but that couldn't last forever. Purdue didn't have many key players enter the portal, and that was a part of why Purdue didn't get all that active in it. I don't even remember if it was called the portal back when Matt Harms and No-Gel Eastern left, and that was probably your highest profile example of guys transferring before this week. But from a rankings, a status perspective, Oscar Cluff is undoubtedly the top transfer that Purdue has landed in recent memory. And Purdue was prepared. Purdue planned on this. This was not something that Matt Painter was shy about. Purdue was going to be active in the portal. It had to be. And we'll talk about Cluff more here soon. But Purdue also saw some contributors move on. And that, again, is something that Purdue hasn't had to deal with recently. And I think it is a reflection of the time we're in. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I don't know if it's a good thing. I think it's just a thing. But in terms of good things, Brian Waddell, we talked about him last week, just was never the same player after that knee injury in the fall of 2021. That made his path to playing time really, really narrow. That put him behind quite a bit. Ultimately, he was never able to carve out a role in Purdue's rotation. And then Berg was simply a roll of the dice by Purdue on a giant human being. And if there is a program in America that has earned the right to take a flyer on a really big dude, It's Purdue. Berg needed lots and lots of development. That was obvious as soon as you started seeing him play in game action. And there wasn't a lot of that. That's where the problem lies. How do you develop when you're not getting a lot of game action to work through? Problem is, Purdue's not in a position to live with that growth, to live with the clunkers of games that come with that, to live with the fact that you're in these big-time games against big-time opponents, and you can't afford to have all of these growing pains at the center position. Purdue's been in win-now mode for the better part of a decade here. And when Purdue came into this season knowing that it had a solid team, knowing that with Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn, your floor is really high, Purdue couldn't live through a ton of growing pains. This here is the good of the transfer portal. Undoubtedly. There is no argument that this is a bad thing. These two guys had a virtually no chance of earning a significant role next year, and now they can go somewhere where they can finish their college careers and play basketball, play meaningful minutes on a basketball team. I'm not positive that Brian Waddell will have graduated from Purdue. That's always a plus. Obviously he's a legacy guy with his dad playing at Purdue. That right there is really hard to complain about, if you ask me. And it drew a little bit of a different response when Myles, Colvin, and Camden Heide hopped in the portal during the week. This is where the modern realities are on more display, because both of these players would have had a role next year on a team with national championship aspirations. That's a really good spot to be in, but the roles would have been limited. When you factor in Oscar Cluff coming in, and that seemed to be a done deal for quite a while, at least as soon as Purdue's season ended and he got to West Lafayette, Purdue had that in the bag. That makes 4 guys on your roster that are going to be go-to guys above everyone else. You have Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Fletcher Lawyer, and Oscar Cluff. Those guys are going to get more opportunities on offense to go do things than Cam Heide or Myles Colvin. And with 2 years of eligibility left for each of those guys, it's understandable that you want to go look to move on, that you want to go finish your career somewhere where you're not the 5th or 6th option. That's fair. This probably wasn't the season that Myles Colvin had hoped for. He shot 37% from the field, 31% from 3, just 5.4 points a game. He got the chance to start for a little bit there late November into December, but it didn't stick. Purdue wasn't at its best at that point, and Purdue moved things around. He played a lot of minutes, averaged 18 a game, more or less starter minutes there. He made some progress defensively. There's no doubt about that. He made improvements there, but it didn't all come together. And we've talked about how he didn't play at a super high level of high school basketball, playing at a lower level, did not play on a big AAU circuit. That made for a big learning curve. That made for a big adjustment period. And ultimately, it just didn't come together particularly quickly. Maybe as quickly as some folks thought it would. It didn't feel to me that there was a huge path for him to carve out a 25 to 30 minute per game role next year. As for Cam Heide, that one surprised me a little bit more. Colvin didn't shock me in the slightest bit. I thought Purdue might be done in the portal after Cluff committed when Heide was still around. Cam Heide presents some versatility as a player who can play both the 3 and the 4, but with Oscar Cluff, that probably pushes Heide to a bench role. Because Cluff, I'd be very surprised if Oscar Cluff came to Purdue to come off the bench. That's one of the top guys in the portal available. One of the top big men. I don't know that he was coming to Purdue to come off the bench. So that pushes Trey Kaufman-Renn to the 4. And then what does that do with Cam Heide? Are you going to start him at the 3? That's a lineup with 2 guys who can handle the ball. I don't know that you can do that. So that puts him to the bench. And while he would still play a very sizable role and could still probably get 20 minutes a game, when you look at Purdue mixing and matching looks, he could get some minutes at the 4, some minutes at the 3. Does he want to spend that time, his last 2 years of eligibility, do you want to spend that second to last year as a reserve? I don't know. He's already found a landing spot. He's going down to Austin, being part of Sean Miller's first team at Texas, somewhere where he can probably play a bigger role. Texas is a good program. It made the first 4 this year, but it's not one with Final Four aspirations next year. It wouldn't shock me at all if he got, the more or less guaranteed starter role. It's still a high level. He's playing in the SEC. It was the best conference in basketball this year, so it's not a step back by any means. It's not transferring down. He finished the season well. He had a fine wrap up to the season. A really bad slump there around the new year into February just torpedoed his numbers, and in a way that he couldn't really make up when it came for the final ledger at the end of the season. But this one is the bigger loss of the two because of that versatility, I think. He gives you the option to play that 3 and 4, and that's something that you really like, because I think Myles Colvin was pretty limited at the 3 because of the ball handling restrictions. And this is something I've been workshopping for a while. I wonder if this is the last of the guys in Purdue's backcourt, or, backcourt type pieces, guys who can play the one, in the 1-2-3 mix, who aren't really ball handlers. I've really been thinking about this for a while, going back to Lance Jones last year, because in the Fairleigh Dickinson game, Purdue, and throughout that season, Purdue lived dangerously a lot because it had very questionable ball handling outside of Braden Smith, who was a freshman at that point. And obviously that team didn't shoot well from 3. And in that game, Purdue shot abysmally from 3, and Purdue turned it over a million times. And since that game, Purdue has not accepted the commitment from a guard or wing who cannot handle the ball. Lance Jones handles the ball. Luke Ertl, Purdue got a commitment from him. He can handle the ball. CJ Cox, Jakari Harris, those guys can handle the ball. We'll see what Purdue does in the portal elsewhere here. But I think Benter was already committed by then, but he's capable of handling the ball. I'm very curious to see where this goes, because that was the one thing, more than anything, that held Myles Colvin and Camden Heide back, was they have all the athleticism in the world. And I've seen plenty of thoughts, Purdue loses its 2 best athletes. Sure, and they did use their athleticism on defense at times, but, Cam Heide was guarding 4s a lot. It's not like his athleticism was helping him there. He was fighting for his life guarding bigger 4s, and that's by no fault of his own. That was just a limitation Purdue had to live with. But outside of catching lobs, when did the athleticism show up for those guys? They couldn't dribble. They couldn't get to the hole. You saw Myles Colvin do it, late in the game against Rutgers, against their backups. But for the most part, these guys were classic 3-and-D guys, which is great. There's a role for that. But the athleticism isn't utilized on offense to its fullest capacity when there's no ball handling. As I said, both of these guys really had chances to lock down starting spots. Purdue had to go a little bit bigger with Caleb First. He gave them a good spark. And Purdue went with more ball handling in the backcourt with CJ Cox. Someone who is a true freshman was a better ball handler than Myles Colvin. I'm curious, though. That's something I've been working on for a while, and I'll talk about it more in the offensive structure and things, but it's something I've really, really noticed over time, is that Purdue's had a lot of these guys. Brandon Newman was not a ball handler. Sasha Stefanovic was not a ball handler. Ryan Klein really wasn't. He got better at it over time, but I'm curious to see where Purdue goes with that. But in general here, this is just a reflection of the time in the sport. Purdue is probably on track to be a better team next year than it would be if the portal didn't exist. This is probably going to be a net positive for Purdue. I don't think there's any sense in being upset at the players who opted to leave because these are reasonable, sensible decisions by all four of these players. It makes sense. There is no, mind-boggling thing. And while NIL is always a factor, I don't think NIL is the primary factor in any of this. I get it. Purdue brings in Oscar Cluff on the flip side, the first portal commitment of the class. Averaged 17.5 points, 12.5 rebounds at South Dakota State last year. A first-team All-Summit League guy. Played at junior college, then at Washington State, then at South Dakota State, and now Purdue. Well-traveled fella. A very nice addition here. This is one of the most coveted players in the portal. I believe when he committed to Purdue, On3 had him around number 1 nationally. Is in the transfer portal rankings. That's an impressive get because, recruiting forwards and centers out of the portal is like the offensive and defensive line in football. It's very over-recruited because there aren't that many guys at that size capable of playing at a high level. So because of that scarcity, it gets over-recruited. What a great pickup by Purdue to be able to get him and be able to get him quickly. I think this shows how well prepared Purdue was to go in and get an impact guy at its biggest position of need. This is someone who should be able to fit in really well from day one. Purdue's going to have to tweak some things offensively with him and Trey Kaufman-Renn playing together because if you have him on the block, Trey Kaufman-Renn doesn't have as much space to work with. But you can do some different things as well. It should present some new opportunities. And more than anything, it should provide some solutions to what ailed Purdue this past season. This is someone who pulled down 12 rebounds a game. And there is a huge difference between the Summit League and the Big Ten. Don't get me wrong. Is he a 17 and 12 guy in the Big Ten? No. I doubt it. I'd be shocked. But does he need to be? Not even close. He doesn't need to be that kind of guy at all. This solves Purdue's size issue. Now you have him and Daniel Jacobson in the mix at the center position. There's your 5 spot. This allows Trey Kaufman-Renn to slide to the 4. He's more than capable of doing it. Raleigh Burgess is in that mix. I don't know exactly how he'll factor in, but he's in that mix. Purdue got this done quick. This was efficient. This was a coveted piece. This gives you an idea of the appeal of playing at Purdue, and this also gives you an idea of where Purdue is at financially. Oscar Cluff isn't coming to play at Purdue for one of the den pops over from the discount den. He's not coming to play for a XXX breakfast special. He's getting something sizable here. Guys that are that good out of the portal are getting something pretty significant. This is a really good start for Purdue. After the break, we will talk about what's next. Severe weather season has arrived in Indiana. I hope all of you are okay and well after the widespread activity this past week. But if you're an Indiana homeowner and haven't reviewed your home insurance recently, give me a call. As an agent for Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I can help make sure your home is properly protected and that you have the proper coverage for you and your family. Call me at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com. And while we talk about your insurance, we'll talk some Purdue sports as well. What's next for Purdue in the transfer portal here? As I said, I thought Purdue could probably hang it up after getting Oscar Cluff before Camden Heide hopped in the portal. The biggest thing to remember here, this is not fantasy basketball. This is not playing the video game where you can turn on ignore budgets and turn on force trades and you can put all the best players in the league on one team. You can't do that. You have to get guys who are willing participants in what you want to do. And that could be a challenge here when you have so many known commodities in the fold. Purdue still needs to add, though. I don't know that you can go into this year with that big of a question at the 3 spot. It can be a bigger guard too. I mean, again, this isn't fantasy basketball. You're not getting, you're not creating a my player and just uploading him to this Purdue team. You have to be realistic here. What that looks like for Purdue, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. One thing I don't do is, this reckless speculation on who players could be, who Purdue might be targeting. I don't think it's fair to the players to throw their names out left and right and act like there's legitimacy there, because if there's not, you're putting them in an awkward spot. And you're putting Purdue in an awkward spot by, spreading this stuff, and you're creating narratives that don't need to exist, or, creating drama that doesn't need to exist. So I don't do that here. The most tiresome part of this portal process is having random accounts tweeting out a laundry list of names, acting like there's legit mutual interest, something's going down. And then I get a million texts from people asking if Purdue's recruiting these guys, when A, I don't really know, and B, there's no reason to believe it. I mean, if you really got into every guy Purdue's been floated to be really into on Twitter, Purdue would have enough players for a JV team. And that doesn't happen anymore. Those days have gone by the wayside. So I have better things to do than really traffic in some of the reckless speculation here. We'll see what happens, ultimately. We'll see what happens. I would be pretty surprised if Purdue lost any more players. Purdue, I'm thinking out loud here. I don't have a scholarship grid in front of me. There are 15 roster spots, yes, and those can all be scholarship players if you want them to. The misnomer that I will point out, though, is that, yes, you can have 15 scholarship players, but you really can't play more than 10. And 10 is a stretch. I remember the last couple of years, it would have been like the Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer freshman year, where Purdue was playing 10, and then it simply just became impossible to keep playing Brian Waddell. Was it the same deal the next year, too? I'm trying to remember if Waddell was getting minutes at all that year. But you really can't play 10 guys. 9 is the most you can play. If you have 15 scholarship players, how are you handling that when 40% of your scholarship guys are getting DNPs? I don't think that's a particularly sustainable idea. So the sweet spot probably is 13, probably is 12, somewhere around there. So yeah, Purdue has room to add more. Could add 2 more? Sure. Maybe you add a younger guy who you're not planning on giving tremendous minutes to right away. I don't know. I do think Purdue wants to operate with long-term continuity here in mind, but I do think Purdue recognizes that next year is its year to go do something, because I'll transition here. Purdue is a legitimate national title contender next season. There will not be a team out there that returns a core as productive as Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn. Right there, you have 2 preseason All-Americans, possibly your National Player of the Year, preseason National Player of the Year in Braden Smith. First team preseason All-American in Trey Kaufman-Renn seems reasonable. And you've got a 1,500-plus point scorer, a sharpshooter in Fletcher Lawyer. Not many teams are getting that back. You add in Oscar Cluff, one of the more desired big guys in the portal, and you get Daniel Jacobson back, someone that Purdue was really, really high on. Now, coming off a year injury, it's not ideal, but you get him back. You get 2 really promising freshman guards that turn into sophomores. How many other teams will have that type of continuity? How many teams will have 2 All-Americans? How many teams will have that high level of experienced player? It's almost like Purdue becomes that most experienced team. Jack Benner comes off a red shirt too. I wouldn't ignore him. I think, I don't know what type of impact he'll make, but he'll make some impact next year. There's no more COVID year though. So these teams, Auburn having most of its roster be 24, 25 years old, that's done. Chad Baker-Mazara is not coming back. He's 25. Time to move on. You're not going to have these teams full of sixth-year players anymore. What you'll have is teams trying to get old out of the portal. That's going to be a thing forever now. That's a constant. Teams want to get old. Matt Painter's been on that for forever now. Get old and stay old. But Purdue's going to have a blend of older players with a ton of experience. In theory as well. And we'll see if this turns to be true or not. But in theory, revenue sharing should at least level the playing field is not the right term because that's not going to happen. But the gap should be bridged a little bit by revenue sharing. There's still, the collective NIL type of stuff that's going to keep that gap. And every school can spend its rev share money a little bit differently. But I do think there's going to be more money in basketball now. Whereas previously, I think the gap in the Big Ten will shrink this year between the top teams and the bottom teams because the revenue sharing pool will be fairly similar from school to school. Maybe some will have some variance. Maybe it'll be $1 million or $2 million here and there in what goes into basketball. But I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy. So if you have that playing field a little bit leveled, but you have 2 All-Americans coming back, you have Fletcher Lawyer coming back, you have Oscar Cluff, you have some really good players, that puts Purdue in a wonderful spot. Right now, Purdue has the 5th best odds on DraftKings to win the national title next year. Frankly, I disagree with that. I don't think there are 4 teams more likely to win next year's national title than Purdue. Assuming Purdue gets everyone back that it thinks it's going to get back, and we'll say Purdue adds just an average piece out of the portal. I think Purdue is in a spot to really make a run at a national title next year, where the Final Four is in Indianapolis, where Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Renn are seniors. I think Purdue is in a really, really good spot going into next year to have one of those years that it's longed for. One of its 1988s, one of its 1994s, one of its 2010s, its 2024s, one of those years where Purdue is really making a push at a national title, hoping to finally break through and get it done. All right, hopping into the Q&A portion here. Do you have any concern about Oscar Cluff clogging up the lane with Trey Kaufman-Renn being a guy that can't shoot at all? Also, is he going to be a shot blocker? Love the pickup, just playing devil's advocate. Yeah, I mean, it's something Purdue will have to figure out. Purdue will have to figure out how to play those two together most effectively. I do wonder if we'll see Trey Kaufman-Renn look to take a few more three-point shots next year. It's something he will have to do if he wants to get an NBA look. He's not going to be just your traditional big guy in the NBA. What he does now is great. You know how I feel about the NBA. I'm not really a fan of the style of basketball they play, but he's going to have to be able to show an ability to shoot threes. He went 8 for 24 as a sophomore 2 seasons ago. And then this past year, he went like 3 for 7, I think. He put up a few, mostly early on in the year. Yeah, he went 3 for 7. So he has the ability to knock down a shot. We'll see. If he's playing alongside Daniel Jacobson and you've got some rebounding down there, why not? But yeah, it's something we're going to see. I wonder, though, can you do some high-low stuff in the post with those two? Trey Kaufman-Renn's kind of deadly in that, in that 15-foot range. He's pretty good there. Can you do some of the big pick-and-roll stuff that Michigan did? I don't know, but Trey Kaufman-Renn can handle the ball pretty well for a guy at the 4 or 5 spot. He's not Danny Wolf, but he can do some good stuff. This could be big for Purdue on the offensive glass, though. That's a big area. Anytime you're a good offensive team and you can steal more possessions, that's big. And that that should be a really big plus for Purdue. Among Raleigh Burgess, Jakari Harris, and CJ Cox, who do you feel is most likely to make the biggest leap forward in their sophomore season? I think Raleigh Burgess just needs to get healthy and get comfortable. He can take a step forward, but the path to him having some big breakthrough year is kind of narrow when you look at the other pieces in the front court. You have 3 guys there who are going to play above him. We'll see if Purdue adds someone else who can factor in at the 4. He's got to get healthy, first and foremost. So I would remove him here. I'm of the opinion that Purdue will get CJ Cox's best when Braden Smith is gone. And that sounds like a negative, and it really is not meant to be. I think Purdue will get the best from CJ Cox when he has the opportunity to have the basketball in his hands more often. Because right now, you're not taking it out of Braden Smith's hands. He's too good. He's the best point guard in the country. He just won the Cousy Award. You know, he's going to go down as one of the best point guards, true point guards in college basketball history. He has a chance to break the NCAA assist record next year. That's nuts. That's crazy. You're not taking the ball out of his hands. And I do think CJ Cox needs to have the ball in his hands to use some of his dynamic ability a bit, because he can get to all 3 levels. He can do some good things. But I look at Jakari Harris here. It sets up well for him to make a nice impact, because what does Purdue need? Purdue needs someone to make open threes. Jakari Harris got better at that throughout the year. He finished the season shooting 31% from 3, but man, he started the year like 2 for 19 or something. He finished the year on a much higher note. If he can take that next step, by the way, he shot the same percentage from 3 this year that Myles Colvin did. I'll just throw that out there. If he can take that next step and shoot better from outside and play defense at a high level and be able to help handle the ball and help Purdue push the pace a little bit, I think it suits for him really well to complement what Purdue wants to do next year. Cox and Harris are both interchangeable. Purdue needs both those guys to knock down threes. Purdue needs both of them to attack closeouts when they can. Purdue needs both of them to defend, to help handle the ball, all of that. But for the sake of answering a question here, I'll go with Jakari Harris. What does Purdue basketball look like after next year? 4 of the starting 5 would be leaving, assuming Oscar Cluff starts. Yeah. To some degree, it feels almost crazy to project out, given the instability of rosters year over year. We'll see if the revenue sharing stuff and revenue sharing contracts can steady that a little bit. I'm skeptical. We'll see. This is where CJ Cox and Jakari Harris would get their time in the spotlight as juniors. The backcourt would be theirs. They would be your starting 1 and 2 probably, unless Purdue looks to add like a true point guard. I don't know. I think CJ Cox can handle the ball. I think Jakari Harris can handle the ball. But they would not do what Braden Smith does. But nobody will. No, you're not going to replace Braden Smith. You just aren't. You just can't do it. I mean, it's not going to happen. He is so unique for a reason. But those 2 will get their time in the spotlight. And then Daniel Jacobson and Raleigh Burgess. Those guys will be around in the front court. Both of them, unproven potential at this point, but I do believe there is potential with each of those guys. How does Jack Benner mesh in? I'm fairly high on him. Luke Ertl would be a freshman out at Mount Vernon. He looks to be a really, really good player, someone who really fits what Purdue wants to do. Antoine West will be around. We'll see if Purdue adds anyone, who would be a multi-year transfer. And then Purdue will be getting active here this summer in the 2026 class. I know it's out recruiting that already. Obviously, it already has a commitment, working on others. But in theory, and I don't know what to make of it anymore now that the portal is so prevalent, but that would be a huge recruiting class in the olden days of 5 years ago. That would be a huge recruiting class. When you lose those guys, trying to replace them is a real challenge. But, that's why next year is your year. You're all in. I don't like saying that because it's not like Purdue's punting on these other seasons, but sometimes it's the perfect storm. And when you're not recruiting 5 stars like Duke is, and you're not going out and throwing around the most insane NIL bags to portal guys, you have to kind of get your teams together. And when you have the right group to make a real push, you've got to capitalize. I wanted to close here. A couple thoughts. The Final Four being all 1 seeds, not a bad thing in my mind. Really. I like seeing the best teams in it at the end. I do. I'm a fan of that. I can't believe that Houston beat Duke. That blew my mind. I knew Houston was good. Obviously, Houston's very good. We saw them in Indianapolis. We've seen what they've done this year, losing just 1 game since November. There was a part of it that, I just wondered, man, a team that maybe should have lost to Purdue, are they going to go do it in the Final Four? I don't know. That should be a really good game on Monday. And then there's not a great solution to this, but something has to be done about video reviews in college basketball. We're to the point where this is a net negative on the sport. I really do. This might have been better back when there were no video reviews at all. The final 2 minutes of a game can take like 20 minutes of real time. And while that might be an exaggeration, I don't know how much of an exaggeration it really is. You can't go back. You can't go back in time because the outrage, if a missed call, really defined a game, really determined the outcome, would be way too much to deal with. This is a real problem. The NCAA has got to find a better solution here than having these reviews for everything, because it doesn't feel like that many calls are getting overturned. It really doesn't. I don't know. I am more pro officiating than most people. I'll be the first to acknowledge that, having done it a lot in my life. But I mean, the viewer experience is really, really rough inside those final 2 minutes. Guys, I wanted to say again, thank you for hanging out this season. This is now 5 years of Purdue football and basketball down on the podcast. I appreciate those of you who have been here through all of it. We'll be here all summer. We'll be talking Purdue sports. Send me over stuff, guys. Questions, episode ideas, people you want me to have on the podcast. I'm all ears. We've got lots to talk about. So send me over stuff. We will talk next week. We'll find something to talk about. There will be more. Give the show a follow on Twitter @BoilersBeyond. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Send me over questions, things you want me to talk about. Until next week, guys, take care.